But there's a new man at Stamford Bridge, one who's left his mark on United before. Can Graham Potter lead the Blues to victory in what will be his first big test? Time to make a statement. It's Chelsea versus Man United.
Well, it's a massive game, Chelsea against Manchester United. Let's hear from both managers ahead of this one. Erik ten Hag, but first, Graham Potter.
I have a huge respect for Ten Hag and the job that he's done in his career and the qualities as a coach. You can see that people adapt and people adjust as they go into the competition phase. So I think they've done well. They've obviously not a great start from their perspective, but they've battled back and they're getting points and they're playing well. So it's going to be a tough game.
So after Rayo Vallecano, I thought it's unacceptable, but he wasn't the only one, but that is for everyone. So when it's the second time, that will have consequences. That is now what we did, and so we miss him tomorrow, and that is a miss for us, for the squad. It's a miss, but I think it's important for the attitude, for the mentality from the group. And now we have to focus on Chelsea, and that is the most important.
So Erik ten Hag confirming that Cristiano Ronaldo is not part of the matchday squad for the match at Chelsea this weekend after he refused to come on as a substitute in the match against Spurs midweek and left Old Trafford early before the game was over as well. Erik ten Hag chose to make Ronaldo train separately from the group and now will not be involved with the rest of the squad this weekend. How strong a message is Erik ten Hag sending out, Farah, with the way he's dealt with this?
I think a good message. I think, he's showing who's in charge. I think if he didn't deal with this issue, as he mentioned there, it's happened in pre-season and a few players did it and they let it go under the carpet. They spoke about it. But to do it again in a game, as obvious as that, I think, from Ronaldo, it's poor judgment. I think his decision-making in terms of doing that and not wanting to come on and help your team, who, against the Tottenham team, it's probably their best game of the season. So you should want to be a part of that. He's turned a very good Man United performance and he's switched the focus onto himself. Really selfish of him. I think he's showing who's in charge. And I think in terms of the younger players, if you can do it to somebody of Ronaldo's status, then you can do it with anyone. And so I think the fact that he's done that to Ronaldo, these younger players will know there's a way of dealing with things, and it's not in the way that Ronaldo showed against Tottenham in midweek.
Could this be the start of winning around a huge fan base at Manchester United, who some maybe weren't sure as of yet of what Erik ten Hag was going to achieve at the club, but after their best performance of the season against Tottenham in that win midweek, and then a strong message being sent out like this now, could this be the start of the turnaround?
Yeah, it should help. The thing with Ronaldo is he's always going to have fans. And like in football in this day and age, it's not necessarily fans of the club. Ronaldo will have picked up fans from Real Madrid and Juventus and kind of followed him to United, and they're always going to follow Ronaldo and back him regardless. But that's the interesting thing. Like, football is so kind of public relations facing and so obvious. If Ronaldo had just kept his head down and been annoyed, there could be stories in the papers about Ronaldo's not being professional or whatever, and you wouldn't really know whether to believe it, because you think, well, it's Cristiano Ronaldo, he must be behaving properly. But then to go and do that so publicly, I think it could be a real benefit for Ten Hag. Like Farah was saying, for the young players, it sets an example. It's a bit like what happened at Arsenal with Mikel Arteta, with Aubameyang. It was almost like he was looking for somebody to make an example of, and I think Jose Mourinho does that sometimes unfairly. When he goes into clubs, he makes example of players, so everybody knows they've got to fall into line. But Ronaldo's kind of handed it to him on a plate. But nobody's disputing that the action Ten Hag's taken is wrong, really. And the only way you can maybe pick fault in it is say, he should just ban him for longer.
I think what's
because he's saying after this game he'll be back in, but I don't know if he should be.
I think what's disappointing with Ronaldo is that he stands for being that role model and really trying to help and set examples for these young players. And he speaks about having done that throughout his career, because as a young player coming in at Man United, that's what he did. The older players, more experienced, he'd listen to. But these are bad examples. Since coming back to Man United, when things haven't gone his way, he spat his dummy out. I think he's acted really immaturely. at Man United since his return, and I haven't for 1 minute he set a good example since his return to Man United for some of these youngsters. Even on the pitch, you could see when Sancho and Rashford were playing alongside him. Not petrified is probably the wrong word, but they were so intimidated playing in and around him if they didn't give him the correct pass. And so I didn't think that he's actually, since his return, has been a good role model for these younger players, even though publicly he tries to say that's what he wants to do.
What does it suggest about Ronaldo's future at Manchester United? Can we expect him to leave the club in January if he's allowed to?
Well, I mean, he's obviously trying to engineer it as much as possible. I think he wanted to go in the summer. Certain people at United didn't want that to happen because, you know, of everything he brings off the pitch, and you could still argue on the pitch if they played like they did last season because he scored goals. They didn't want that to happen. I think I was only on this show 2 weeks ago with Tim Sherwood, and I was like, I think Ten Hag would have got rid of him in the summer, but it wasn't really his decision. So it just depends now if those people at United are still saying, it's Ronaldo, we've got to keep this guy, or if things like this are going to say, he's got to go. I suppose it depends, because it really is unbelievable, because from my point of view in the media, it's great having Farrow on, because Farrow can explain so many things that we don't understand as people who haven't played football. But in the media, I could sit here and say, oh, Ronaldo's done this, and he's done this, and he's done this, but nothing's official, and nobody sitting at home is going to know for a fact if I'm telling the truth or not. Or I could even be wrong because, you know, the sourcing or whatever. But the mad thing is, this is all played out publicly. Ronaldo did that, knowing how it would go down, trying to kind of force his way out. So if he does come back in, what next? You know, if United play really well, and again, I think the catalyst for it was United playing so well against Spurs, possibly thought, I can't believe they're doing this without me, I can't handle it, I'm off. If the United do keep on playing well and there's no place for him, well, it sounds very dramatic, but what steps would he take next to force him out? And then at what point would United say, okay, yeah, he needs to go? The other element is, where does he go?
Yeah. Well, it's fascinating to see how this is all going to unfold, and a bit of a shame, as you say, that this story has overshadowed what was an excellent performance by Manchester United midweek, which now carries them into this Chelsea game. And Chelsea are in very good form themselves, Farah, unbeaten under Graham Potter so far. What do you expect the game to be like?
Difficult with Graham Potter to know what team he's going to put out, what formation he's going to go with, because I think he's tinkered a little bit since coming in from Brighton. He's certainly, the opening game in the Champions League wasn't great, and then he's gone on from there. But he does tend to rotate the team quite often. 5 or 6 players tend to come out. He flips from a back 4 in the Premier League to 5 in the Champions League. So it'll be interesting. What I like about him is defensively, Chelsea are conceding less goals.
How much is that is down to Kepa?
Yeah, I think he's been impressive. Kepa, I mean, coming in and changing your number 1 straight away, which is what he did. He gave Mendy a chance. He was in bad form when Potter came in, but Kepa's been phenomenal. I mean, for somebody that was wrote off by many, as a young goalkeeper, to then come back in and have the performances he's done, and and it was in all of the games played. He's had to save Chelsea in big moments. He's pulled off some really, really big saves. So he's certainly been important to this team. And especially, as I said there, when Chelsea are changing that back line from a 4 to a 5, sometimes if you have a constant keeper and somebody that's in form who you can trust behind you, I think gives those players that come in the confidence. But I'm excited by Potter being at Chelsea and what he can bring. I was excited when I watched him with the Brighton team. He's now got arguably better calibre of players to work with. Hence why we're seeing, the crazy formation changes and tactical changes, because he's such a good coach.
And Mason Mount has been flourishing under Graham Potter as well. He's the only outfield player to have started every single game under the new manager, and he's set to make his 100th Chelsea appearance if he starts this game, which you'd expect him to, barring any injuries or anything happening. How much do you think his improvement this season is down to the fact that Graham Potter's clearly made him his main man?
Yeah, it could be, because we were talking about Brighton earlier on and why they don't score goals and how it's kind of similar to Potter before, because they had these players who were like technicians, like Mason Mount, you'd say at Brighton, not quite at that level, but players like that who aren't necessarily clinical, but they had a lot, and it seems like that's the way Potter likes his players to work. The thing with Mount is he's been good for a long time now. I was just thinking when you were saying there, remember when people used to say that he was like Frank Lampard's like teacher's pet or whatever, and that's the only reason he played, which was just nonsense. Like, he's always been really good. And yeah, Chelsea are a funny one because they haven't really had that number 9, well, like for as long as anyone can remember. They've had famous problems with number 9s, so they need other options. And Mount's got goals in him. He's shown that under previous managers. There's been so much chopping and changing at Chelsea. He's probably used to it. And Potter coming in, I think he's used to working with those players, likes working with those players, and knows how to get them in those areas to score goals. And we have seen him before. No, he knows how to finish. He's not, ultra prolific, but you can see him carrying on and being a big part of this team. And also, obviously, with the World Cup coming up, you can make a bit of a push for that.
Absolutely. Right, Southampton against Arsenal also.